Let us open now the annals of the Third Age and turn to that account recorded in the Red Book of Westmark, which tells of the great strife that befell the kingdom of Rohan, a time when the shadow of war lengthened from the east, and the very strength of the west was put to its most dire test.
Our tale begins, as so many do, in the shadow of loss. For upon the shores of the great river Anduin, the Fellowship of the Ring was broken. Its members, well, they were scattered to the winds of fate, and the quest itself was cast into grievous peril.
And so, we must first speak of this sundering, and of the noble death that sanctified it. For even in such deep sorrow, deeds of great renown were wrought.
It is recorded that Boromir of Gondor, the son of the steward Denethor, found redemption in his final hour. Though he had for a moment fallen to the ring's insidious temptation, he stood alone against the might of Isengard. A deed of truly great valor, one that cleansed his honor, and, most importantly, it preserved the hope of the halflings.
With this ruin, the burden of command fell upon Aragorn, the heir of Elendil. And in that moment, he made a choice that would shape the entire war to come. He would let the ring-bearer walk his own path into shadow, and he would pursue the captors, for he would not abandon the least of the Fellowship to torment and death.
So it was that two paths diverged. One, a path of relentless pursuit across the green plains of the Riddermark, the other, a desperate flight in the very clutches of the enemy.
For many, many leagues, the three hunters, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, pursued their foe, a chase of legendary speed and endurance. They sought tidings from the riders of Rohan, led by Éomer, nephew to the king, only to learn that the orc band had been utterly destroyed. And yet, of the hobbits, no trace could be found. But Providence was at work here, a design far beyond the sight of even the wise. For the hobbits, Meriadoc Brandybuck and Peregrine Took were in that chaos delivered from their captors. And they passed into a realm remembered only in the oldest of tales, the ancient forest of Fangorn.
In this dark hour, two ancient powers were roused from a long, deep slumber. They would turn the tide against the shadow of Isengard. A new hope was kindled, yes, but an old, old vengeance was stirred.
Within the deeps of that forest, the hobbits came before Treebeard, his elvish name, Fangorn. It is said he is the oldest living thing in all of Middle-earth, his memory stretching back to the elder days, to a time before the first rising of the sun.
And as the wizard Mithrandir himself later foretold, a force not seen in Middle-earth for many an age was about to be loosed upon his foes. The long, slow anger of the wood was at last, finally, roused to wrath.
These were the Ents, the shepherds of the trees, brought into being in the mists of time by the Vala Yavanna herself, to guard the green growing things of the world. Their wrath against Saruman, the destroyer of trees, would prove more terrible than any army of orcs. This was the vengeance of nature itself.
At this very same time, he who fell in battle with the Balrog of Moria was sent back from death by the powers of the West, for his task was not yet complete. He returned not as Gandalf the Grey, but as Gandalf the White, clad in new authority and terrible power.
He rode to Edoras, the golden hall of the kings of Rohan. There, he healed Theoden King from the creeping poison of Saruman's counselor, Grima Wormtongue. He roused the ancient spirit of the Rohirrim, calling them to their oath to Gondor. And at long last, the horns of the mark were sounded for war.
And so the storm broke. War came at once to the fortress of men and to the fortress of the fallen wizard. Two towers, one of hope, one of treachery, were about to face their doom.
Two great sieges raged in those fateful days. At the Hornburg, in the deep fastness of Helm's Deep, it was the wrath of men, a desperate defense against overwhelming hate. But at Isengard, the fortress known to the elves as Angrenost, it was something else entirely. It was a terrible reckoning of stone against root, the wrath of nature itself.
At Helm's Deep, the strength of Rohan wavered, and it nearly broke. 10,000 Uruk-hai, the foulest creation of Saruman's arts, swarmed against the deeping wall. And as the night wore on, in that darkest hour before the dawn, the fortress stood upon the very brink of ruin. All hope seemed lost.
And it is here that we must speak of eucatastrophe.
It's a term used by the lore masters of old for that sudden, joyous turn, a miraculous grace that arrives when a hopeless situation is unexpectedly and utterly reversed by a power beyond mortal design.
Because as the first light of dawn touched the hills, Gandalf appeared upon the heights with the riders of Erkenbrand. And as the orcs fled the renewed wrath of the Rohirrim, they were met by a new, dark forest of horns that had come down from Fangorn. And from that shadow of wrath, no orc returned.
Meanwhile, the Ents, having concluded their great Entmoot, had marched upon Isengard itself. In their slow, unstoppable fury, they tore the fortress of Saruman asunder. They broke its walls, quenched its fires, and turned that defiled land back into a garden of water and stone.
With victory achieved, the threads of our chronicle now converge at the ruins of Angor Nost. But here, a new and far more subtle peril was revealed, one that could not be overcome with sword or with spear. There, at the foot of the Tower of Orthanc, Gandalf confronted Saruman. The fallen wizard Silvertongue could not sway him from his purpose. And when Saruman refused all counsel, Gandalf broke his staff, casting him from the Order of Wizards and from the White Council. His power was broken, though his deep malice remained. As the victors departed, a heavy, dark orb was thrown from a high window. It was cast down by the traitor Wormtongue in his spite and fury, an artifact of immense power and forgotten danger, straight from the deeps of time. It was a Palantir, one of the 7 seeing stones of old, brought out of the great ruin of Númenor by Elendil the Tall himself. Through this very stone, Saruman had communed with the Dark Lord, and through it he had been ensnared by his will, believing himself a rival, but in the end becoming a mere pawn. And now, through the folly of Peregrine Took, who could not resist the stone's lure, the enemy's gaze was drawn to them. Sauron saw a hobbit in the stone and, crucially, misread its meaning. This brought a new and unforeseen danger upon the quest of the ring, even as one great threat was finally vanquished.